Hello, this is Kira of Kira K Designs, and I want to show you how I separate the yoke on a top-down seamless round yoke pullover. The pattern I'm showing is my Lattice Pullover, and the pattern is available at kirakdesigns.com. So I've already knit all the way to the yoke. There's a certain length for each size that's specified in the pattern, and I've done a little bit of prep work before this round I'm going to do with you right now. So the two things I've done is I've prepared some scrap yarn on a darning needle for holding the sleeves. I have a separate piece of scrap yarn for my second sleeve. I'll just reuse the needle. And then I've also looked at the pattern, and it tells me to work, which means following the knit and purl stitches as they're already established, to work to a certain number of stitches for the front of the sweater, and I put a marker on here. Then it says to put some stitches on a holder for the sleeve. I've put a marker there, and I repeated for the back and the other sleeve. So I don't have to count while I'm doing this round, and that definitely takes out a lot of the possibility of errors. So I have already worked most of the stitches for the sleeve. This is my beginning of the round marker, and I stopped 2 before this marker just so it doesn't fall out. So I'm going to finish my last 2 stitches for the sweater front. I'm going to take this marker out because it has done its job. And now I have my stitches for my sleeve, and I'm going to put those onto my scrap yarn for a holder. And what I do for this is transfer the stitches from my wooden knitting needle onto the metal darning needle. I find it faster to do them one at a time. If you try to go through 2 or 3 or a whole lot, you'll likely split the yarn and end up fighting with it. Now, whenever it feels like this is pretty full, I'll just pull that needle through and let the stitches transfer onto my scrap yarn. And I'm going to repeat that till I have all these stitches on the holder. The basic idea of what's happening here is I am setting the sleeve stitches aside, and later when I'm done knitting the remainder of the body from the armhole down, I will come back, put these stitches back on a needle, pick up a few stitches at the underarm along the cast on stitches I'm about to do, and then knit the sleeve downward as well. And this part's really exciting. It can be a little confusing, but you'll see at the end this is going to look like it's turning into a sweater, whereas now it doesn't look like much of anything. People think I'm making a very weird large hat. It's not quite clear what the shape is going to be. So making the armhole openings is definitely in a really exciting, transformative moment for you. And notice I'm slipping all these stitches purlwise, whether they are knit or purl stitches. And the reason for that is I want the stitch to move over to my darning needle. If I were to slip it knitwise, it would move over and also do a half turn, I'd get a twisted stitch. So I'm going to undo that one and slip it purlwise. All right, so here I'm at my other marker, which means I've got my sleeve stitches for my particular size. I like to take the ends of my scrap yarn and just tie them in an overhand knot. Just a little added security that this now can't come out. And notice I left a lot of slack. That's so that if I want to try this on later, I'll be able to fit my arm in there. So next on my pattern, I am told to cast on 12 stitches for the underarm. And I'm going to do this, let me just shift the angle here so you can see it a little better. I'm going to do this using what is called a double backwards loop cast on, also called a double twisted loop cast on. It's a nice simple one that's a great way to add extra stitches in the middle of something and still have a nice structured edge. So I'm going to take my yarn, I'm going to turn it. I like to go counterclockwise, but I don't think it makes a huge difference. I've turned it once, you can see there's one cross there. Then I'm going to turn it a second time, and now you can see there's 2 crossings. And I'm going to put my needle in, and because I'm holding it this way, I'm going to put my needle in away from me. If I came in from the back, I would undo one of the crosses as I did that. So that's 1, I'm going to do 12, so turn, turn, needle goes in. Notice I'm snugging it up but not making it super tight. I still want a bit of space here. And there are different cast-ons you can use. They're not necessarily right or wrong. I like this because it's quick and easy, and I don't have to turn the whole work around and then remember to turn it back, which sometimes is a little tricky. All right, and always good idea to double check your count. So you can see here where the cast-on stitches started, there's nothing under them. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So now I'm ready to rejoin to the active knitting. This is now the back of the sweater here. So these cast on stitches sort of bridge the underarm, and that gives your piece depth. We're heading into a nice three-dimensionality, which is really good for sweaters because we are three-dimensional beings. So here I am, and I'm just going to follow the stitches as they are. This particular pattern is a rib, and I want to make sure that I'm knitting the stitches that look like knits and purling the ones that look like purl. By the time you get to this point in the sweater, you should be very comfortable with that. And of course, if you're working on a different sweater, your stitch pattern will be different. Generally on this round, you will follow the stitch patterns as established, which means keep doing what you did before. Don't make any changes, but definitely trust your pattern and do what it says to do. We put a lot of work into writing those instructions, and you don't want to go off book unless you understand what we want and why we want it and have a good reason for changing. This part of a sweater where you are separating the yoke is a bit confusing. So don't worry too much if you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing and how it's going to work. Instead, just follow the first step. If you understand the first step, do it. Then look at the second step. If you understand that, go ahead and do that. The big picture might not come until you've finished and you see how it worked. But if you do what it says in the order it says it, it should be just fine. So I'm continuing here along my back stitches, and I know to stop when I get to the marker. I like to put those markers in even if I'm not narrating, which does tend to make it easier for me to get lost in what I'm doing. It's just hard to count up to, 116 or whatever it is as you're doing the stitches, and you're more likely to make a mistake. If you want to double check yourself, you can always count as you're doing the row and have your markers there as a double check. So almost to the end of the back stitches here. This yarn I'm working with is Sincere Sheep Coastal, which is a favorite of mine. It is 50% wool, 25% flax, and 25% silk, and it is just really lovely to work with and lovely to wear. And it's got this nice round structure to it. It's a little hard feeling in a nice way, but it's still got a good amount of stretch and spring. And below the bust on this sweater, there's going to be some cabling, and it's going to pop those cables really nicely. I've worked with this yarn before. It's just wonderful and highly recommend it. All right, so here I am coming up to my marker. And I do not need this marker anymore. I'm going to thread up my yarn needle on my second piece of scrap yarn. And notice the scrap yarn I chose is kind of big. I do that on purpose. It's bigger than my knitting yarn. I choose scrap yarn that is about the size of the knitting needle, so it holds the stitches open with the space they'll need to get back on a needle later on. And just like before, I'm going to just pull this out of the way so it's visibly out of the way and a little safer. I'm going to slip all my sleeve stitches, which is the stitches up to my next marker. Oops, dropped one. Slipping them purlwise onto my darning needle. And when it feels full, I just pull it through onto the yarn. And how long that takes is going to depend on you. It's kind of a comfort level thing. You'll notice I go fast. I kind of push it to, I really have to take them down on the needle. If you like to pull it through every stitch, you can. Just take you longer, but you'll get to the same place. A trick for making both the knitting and the slipping faster is just to bunch up the stitches on your left needle, or your right needle if you're left-handed, and have them ready to spring off when you want them. Alright, so here I am. I'm back to my beginning of the round needle. My beginning of the round marker. Taking my needle off. I was trying to say two things at once. Sometimes I move too fast. I'm going to take this scrap yarn, tie it a little knot. Again, I've left some extra so that if I want to try this on later, which is a huge benefit of top-down sweaters, I'll be able to. And here I'm going to cast on 12 stitches again for my second underarm. And just like before, I'm going to use that double twisted loop cast on. And there are different ways you can do this. I've seen people just twist their finger around. I tend to do it with my hand, just pinching it. If this works better for you, it's totally fine. Just make sure you have 2 twists and you're putting it on the needle in a way that does not remove either of your twists. There is a cast on that's just a single twist. It's called a backwards loop or E-wrap. I do not like that nearly as much. And see here I'm doing, it's almost like the E-wrap. Instead of going in this way, going in that way. Again, gets you to the same place. Whatever feels good to your hands is fine. And I've lost track, so let's count. This is my stitch that I already had. You can tell because there's some fabric below it. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I did one too many, so I'm going to take that off. And then I am ready to rejoin this. So I'm going to slip my beginning of the round marker over. It's a cute marker from a needle runs through it. It makes a lot of my favorite tools. And then I'm going to work as established, following my rib stitches. And as I do this next round, the pattern will prompt me to put in a beginning of the round marker based on where it is in this particular stitch. Sometimes it's right in the middle of the cast on stitches, but here it's more important that it's in a certain place in the pattern, and my instructions definitely tell you that very specifically. So here we are, and I'm going to slide this on to the cord a bit so you can see the shape I'm building. So here I am. It's a little smooshed up on my knitting needle, but you can see these are stitches for the sleeve, which is eventually going to go out that way. And these are stitches for the body, which is going to head downward, so there's going to be no connection here anymore. And all of a sudden, it starts looking like something you can put on a lovely three-dimensional human body. So here's my neck opening. Sleeve's going to go down that way. Body's going to grow down from here. And I will post another video when I'm ready to pick up stitches for the sleeves, getting them off this holder, so that you can have a little bit of help with that as well. Thanks so much. Bye.